The distress signal was faint, little more than a whisper swallowed by the cosmic void, a desperate cry from a dying world. Ignored by every major power in the galaxy, the message was clear. We are under attack. Our cities burn. Our people fall. Please help us. No one came. The ARX Dominion had struck without mercy, a savage species of conquerors. They descended upon the defenseless planet like a storm of fire and steel. Their warships loomed above. Cities, raining devastation. Their soldiers marched through smoldering streets, executing any who dared to resist. The world once called VN4 was fated to become nothing more than another erased name on the star charts. Its people, enslaved or slaughtered. The Galactic Council received the call and did nothing. They muttered about diplomatic entanglements, about non-intervention treaties, about acceptable casualties. They would not risk war with the ARX over a world of no strategic importance. And so, the galaxy turned away. But they had forgotten something. VN4 was not just any world. It was a human colony, and humanity never lets its own fall. The attack fleet emerged from hyperspace in flawless formation, 500 warships strong, a force that should not have existed. The Council had believed humanity was fractured, disorganized, incapable of assembling such might. They had miscalculated. At the forefront sailed the fleet's flagship, Indomitable, a dreadnought the size of a small moon, bristling with weapons. At its helm stood Admiral Elias Vance, his expression granite, his voice steady as he gave the command that would change everything. Begin orbital bombardment. Let them know how it feels to be on the receiving end. The skies over VN4 lit up in flame. The ARX had never feared humanity. They saw them as upstart primitives, reckless, chaotic, more fit to die in the fringes of space than to wage war against an empire. They were wrong. Humanity had spent centuries at war with itself, refining the art of conflict in a way no other species ever had. While the Council outlawed mass invasions, discouraged total war, humanity had ignored those rules. They had built ships for a fight they prayed would never come, but prepared for nonetheless. And now, that preparation was paying off. Indomitables. Rail cannons roared, launching slugs the size of skyscrapers into ARX capital ships, shredding shields and hulls like tissue. Human corvettes surged through enemy formations, weaving between larger vessels, carving them apart with precision. Drop pods screamed from orbit like falling stars, each one delivering soldiers clad in exosuits, designed to endure the galaxy's worst. They landed in the heart of burning cities and didn't stop. The ARX had expected them to be slow, burdened by their heavier armor. Instead, they moved like specters, fast, lethal, unrelenting, pushing through enemy lines with machine-like discipline. Humanity fought like a species forged in battle, because it was. The fighting raged for hours. By the time the last ARX warship tried to retreat, it was too late. Humanity had surrounded them. There was no escape. Admiral Vance stood silent as the enemy flagship burned in the vacuum of space, its hull peeling apart. He didn't smile. There was no joy in war, only duty. The people of VN4 had been forsaken, left to die, but not by humanity, never by humanity, because when one of their own calls for help, humanity answers, and they bring fire. The aftermath of the battle was carved into the skies above VN4, littered with wreckage. Burned-out husks of ARX warships drifted silently, a haunting testament to what had transpired. On the surface, fires still crackled. Entire buildings were reduced to skeletal ruins. Corpses, both human and ARX, lay strewn across streets like broken toys. Admiral Elias Vance stood on the Indomitable's bridge, staring at the devastated world below. His fists clenched at his sides. Victory had come, but not without cost. Thousands of colonists had perished before the fleet arrived, entire cities leveled. The ARX had ensured that even in defeat, they left scars behind. Admiral, a voice pulled him from his thoughts. Captain Leah Monroe, his second in command. The ground teams are securing the last ARX prisoners. Resistance has ended. Vance nodded, his face unreadable. Casualties? Heavy, sir. Both military and civilian. He exhaled. Slow, measured. War always demanded blood, but that didn't mean it had to be meaningless. Open a channel to all surviving colonists, he ordered. Moments later, his voice echoed across the ravaged planet. This is Admiral Elias Vance of the Terran Defense Fleet. The ARX are defeated. Your home is yours once again. We came because no one else would, because humanity does not abandon its own. We mourn the dead, Vance said, his voice echoing across the comms, but we stand for the living. Then he paused, his tone cold as steel. To the ARX, he said, you thought no one would come. He leaned forward, eyes like ice. You were wrong, and you will never forget this day. On the surface, survivors stumbled from bunkers and half-collapsed ruins. Their faces were streaked with soot, their eyes hollow with fatigue. Some wept, others simply stared, uncomprehending, as Terran soldiers moved through the streets, not as invaders, as liberators. A girl, no more than 10, clung to her mother's hand. She watched silently as a squad cleared rubble from the ruins of a collapsed school. One soldier, his armor scratched, dented from the fight, knelt beside her. He pulled a ration bar from his pouch. Here, kid, he said, voice rough. She hesitated, then reached out. Are they gone? He looked skyward, where enemy wreckage still glowed. Yeah, he said, they're gone. For the first time in weeks, she smiled, but the war was far from over. In the dark corners of the galaxy, the ARX Dominion reeled. They had never been hit like this, never bled this badly. Now their high command sat in silence, watching footage of burning ships and broken soldiers. They weren't supposed to be capable of this, one warlord muttered. They weren't supposed to care, another growled. We ignored the colony, someone spat. We assumed the humans would too. The supreme warlord, a towering figure with obsidian black eyes, leaned forward. Then we assumed wrong, he said, voice low and dangerous. Humanity is not the weak, divided species we believed. They came when no one else did, and they came with fire. Silence gripped the war chamber. Then we must prepare, one of the warlords said. Because if they did this for one colony, what will they do if we push them further? The supreme warlord's fingers curled into a fist. They will come again. His eyes smoldered with a mix of fury and reluctant awe. And next time, we must be ready. The fires of Veen 4 had barely cooled when the whispers began. Across the galaxy, the story spread like a shockwave through governments, war councils, and shadowed rooms of power. No one had expected it. No one believed the humans had the strength, or the will, or the cold, calculated resolve to strike back. But humanity had done more than retaliate. They had obliterated the ARX invasion force. Inside the Grand Hall of the Galactic Council, an emergency session convened. Representatives from major species filled the chamber in tense silence, eyes fixed on the central display. Footage of the battle played in brutal clarity. The destruction was total. An ARX fleet expected to crush a colony with ease had been annihilated. This is madness, muttered Chancellor Valin of the Zephyr Union, rubbing the ridges of his scaled brow. How could they do this? They shouldn't have had the numbers, the technology. They did, a deep voice cut in. All eyes turned. It was the ARX representative, Warlord Zeon. His dark gaze burned with barely restrained fury. His species had never suffered a disgrace like this. We underestimated the Terrans, Zeon growled. A mistake we won't repeat. A ripple of unease passed through the chamber. The ARX Dominion remained one of the galaxy's most powerful militaries. If they sought revenge, war could tear apart the fragile peace of centuries. Let's Not rush to conclusions, said Councillor Orvis of the Ciari Alliance, his tone cautious. Perhaps this was an anomaly, an emotional response to an attack on their own. Humans are reactive, loyal to their kind. That doesn't make them a threat to the galactic order. Xian's lip curled in disgust. You're a fool, he snapped. Look at the scale. 500 warships, an army we didn't think they had. They crushed us, and their admiral made it very clear this was just the beginning. The room fell silent. Then a voice emerged from the shadows. They have been preparing for war. Heads turned as High Speaker Luthen of the Ven Coalition stepped forward. The Ven were an ancient species, wise, deliberate, long-watched observers. We thought them chaotic, Luthen continued, eyes narrowing, disorganized, too consumed with internal conflict to pose a threat. He pointed toward the screen, where Indomitable hovered above Veen 4 like a silent sentinel. But we were wrong. They are not divided. They are united. They did not wait for permission. They did not hesitate. This is not the sign of a weak race. Another long silence. Finally, Chancellor Valen exhaled sharply. Then we must ask a question, he murmured. One that will shape the future of the galaxy. He looked around the chamber, voice heavy with dread. Are the humans our allies or our doom? Back on Veen 4, the survivors worked side by side with Terran soldiers, rebuilding what remained. Admiral Vance stood at the edge of the ruined city, staring into the sky where Terran warships still hovered. This won't be the last time, said Captain Monroe, standing beside him. Vance nodded. No, it won't. She hesitated. What do you think the Council will do? He sighed. They'll argue, stall, tell themselves lies that we're still small, still insignificant. Then he turned to her, eyes sharp. But the ARX won't wait. They'll return, stronger, angrier, and next time, it won't be just a colony. They target. Monroe swallowed. Earth. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. They both knew. Veen 4 had been the spark. The fire was spreading. The war drums of the ARX Dominion thundered in the void. From the shattered remnants of their fleet, survivors limped home. But they carried more than pain. They carried a message of shame and vengeance. Warlord Xian stood before the Grand Conclave, wounds still fresh, but it was his pride that bled deeper than flesh. We were wrong about humanity, Xian growled, his voice echoing across the Dominion's war hall. We thought them weak. We believed they would not come. He paused, rage simmering behind his eyes. But they came, and they brought with them a fire unlike anything we've ever faced. A murmur spread among the assembled warlords. The ARX had long prided themselves as unmatched conquerors, undefeated for centuries. But now the stars themselves whispered of their failure. Towering presence stepped forward. High Warlord Vathan, supreme leader of the Dominion. His arrival alone silenced the chamber. He stared down at Xian, face unreadable. You return in disgrace, Vathan said coldly, but disgrace is not defeat. Tell me, Warlord, did you learn? Xian's fists clenched. Yes, High Warlord. He took a breath. We underestimated them. Their technology is not as primitive as we believed, their tactics not as reckless as we assumed, and worst of all, his jaw tightened. They are not afraid of us. Vathan was quiet for a long moment. Then, at last, he spoke. Good. The air froze. Fear breeds fragile enemies, the High Warlord said. I prefer foes who fight, who bleed, enemies who make us stronger. His gaze swept across the warlords, but they must understand their place. Humanity has moved. Now, his voice lowered into a growl, we make ours. Xian straightened. You authorize war? Vathan smiled, slow, predatory. Not. Yet he turned to a holomap glowing with sectors of known space, zones lit in cold blues and crimson reds. Humanity fights with emotion, he mused. They answer threats to their own. He tapped Earth's sector. So we won't target their colonies, we go for the throat. He turned, and every warlord stiffened. Earth. At the far edge of Terran-controlled space, Admiral Elias Vance stood aboard the Indomitable, watching reinforcements arrive. The fleet was growing. Fast. Humanity had prepared for this war long before. Venfor, from the moment the Galactic Council turned their backs, from the moment the great powers labeled them insignificant, they had known, and they had built. In secret, they constructed warships beneath the guise of expansion. They developed weapons the galaxy had never seen. They trained soldiers. For a war no one believed they could win. Status report, Vance said. 20 more warships from Martian shipyards just docked, Monroe replied. We're integrating them now. Ground forces are rotating through training. Morale is high. They know what's coming. Vance nodded. They all felt it. The silence before the storm. Humanity had played its hand. Now they waited for the counterstrike. And it would come. Do you think they'll hit the outer colonies again? Monroe asked. Vance shook his head. No. His voice darkened. If I were them, I'd go straight for Earth. Monroe's expression hardened. Then we have to be ready. Vance turned to the vast view beyond the command deck. Terran ships orbiting silently. Training, loading, preparing. They would be ready. Because when the ARX came, humanity would teach them what war truly meant. The ARX invasion fleet moved through the void like a silent storm. Vast warships blotted out stars, advancing on their target. Earth. This was no raid. This was no colonial skirmish. This was annihilation. The Dominion had come to crush humanity before they could become a true galactic power. Aboard the Eclipse of Dominion, High Warlord Vathan watched the stars from his flagship's bridge. Time to target? 3 standard days, an officer answered. Terran fleet formations detected in the Sol system. They're preparing for war. Vathan's smile was cold. Let them. This would not be a battle. This would be extinction. Back on Earth, the skies churned with activity. Orbital platforms bristled with weaponry. Fighters screamed between skyscrapers, refitted as emergency bunkers. Humanity had seen this coming. Admiral Elias Vance stood in the war room beneath the United Terran Command Center in Geneva. Holograms flickered around him, red representing the enemy fleet surging toward Earth. The room was filled with leaders, military, political, strategic. The numbers were terrifying. 2,000 warships, countless strike craft. Enough firepower to turn Earth to ash. President Alan Graves broke the silence. What's our best estimate? Vance's voice was calm, but grim. They outnumber us 3-1. Their ships are larger, heavily armored, higher energy output. Tense murmur swept the chamber. But they don't have our tech, Vance continued, or our tactics, and most of all, they don't have our will. Graves nodded. Then what's the plan? Vance stepped forward, pointing to the outer Sol planets. We draw them in, make it look like we're falling apart. We bleed, but we don't break. He brought up another projection. Hidden Terran fleets, concealed behind the moon, beneath Mars, beyond Pluto. When they move in for the kill, we cut them off, we trap them, and we end them. He looked up. We'll turn Sol into a graveyard. They came for conquest. They'll find annihilation. Graves inhaled. Then slowly, then let's give them hell. 3 days later, the ARX fleet entered the Sol system. The void rippled with the passage of death. 2,000 warships, planetary bombardment platforms, endless wings of support craft. On board the Eclipse of Dominion, Vathan watched as his fleet tore through Jupiter's defenses. Terran outposts crumbled in moments. Resistance is minimal, an officer reported. They're retreating toward Mars. Good, Vathan said. Amused. Let them run, let them fear. But unease prickled at the edges of his mind. The humans weren't standing their ground. They were falling back, but not chaotically. They were stalling, fighting just enough, delaying. It wasn't retreat, it was choreography. Vathan narrowed his eyes. They were luring him. On the far side of the moon, hidden within Lunar Defense Station Aegis, Admiral Elias Vance stood still, arms crossed. The ARX were doing exactly what he wanted. They're pushing hard, Monroe said, scanning the tactical grid. We've lost several outposts. Acceptable losses, Vance said, cool and composed. They think we're running. Monroe's jaw tightened. And when they're close enough? Vance's lips curled into a thin, grim smile. We shut the door. Hours later, the ARX reached Earth's orbit. The homeworld hung before them, blue, green, vibrant, a jewel waiting to be shattered. Vathan stared down from the bridge of his flagship. A slow smirk spread across his face. It's over, said. Begin orbital bombardment. The command deck erupted in motion. Targeting systems locked onto key cities, New York, London, Beijing, Moscow. Within minutes the planet would burn. Then alarm shrieked. What is this? An officer shouted. Vathan spun toward the tactical display. His eyes widened in disbelief. Hundreds of Terran warships erupted into view, from behind the moon, from under Mars, from deep space beyond Pluto. They hadn't been retreating. They'd been waiting. Impossible, someone cried. A new voice echoed through the flagship's comms. Cold, calm, human. Vathan. The display flickered, and Admiral Elias Vance appeared, staring directly into the heart of the ARX command. You walked right into it. The Terran fleet opened fire. The battle for Earth had begun. The void ignited in a fury of light and death. From every angle, human warships surged forward, unleashing destruction. Railguns thundered. Mass drivers roared. Plasma lances cut through ARX hulls like paper. The enemy's tight formations collapsed under the sudden onslaught. Panic spread like wildfire. Ships twisted, burned, imploded. The trap had sprung. And it was total. They were made of paper. Terran. Starfighters swarmed through the chaos, blurs of metal and fury. Darting between capital ships, slipping through defenses, they drove hyperkinetic payloads straight into enemy weak points, where plating peeled back like tinfoil. Admiral Elias Vance stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, his face carved in stone as the battle unfolded before him. They're trying to reposition, said Captain Monroe, fingers dancing over the tactical map. We hit them too fast. They're scrambling. Not fast enough, Vance replied. Keep the pressure. On no mercy. Across the battlefield, the ARX fleet reeled. High Warlord Vathan bared his fangs as the eclipse of Dominion shuddered violently. Sparks sprayed across the bridge. Report! He roared. Multiple capital ships destroyed. We're being flanked. They were waiting for us. Vathan's mind raced. This wasn't a desperate stand from a dying species. It was a counter-offensive. Planned. With terrifying precision. We underestimated them, he snarled, clutching the railing. We thought them weak. That was our mistake. His gaze hardened. But mistakes can be corrected. Pull back the second and third battle groups. Regroup! Crush their flanks. Break the encirclement. His warlords hesitated. High Warlord, our retreat is cut off. A cold dread settled in Vathan's gut. He turned to the tactical display. Terran ships had maneuvered like predators, closing the circle. Escape routes were gone. They were surrounded, and in that moment it hit him. This wasn't a battle. It was an execution. Terran warships surged forward, giving no quarter. Aboard the Indomitable, Admiral Vance watched as the Dominions' formations shattered. Their vessels fired wildly, carving useless paths through vacuum, trying to escape a trap they had willingly entered. This is it, Monroe whispered. They're finished. Vance nodded once. He opened the fleet-wide comms. All ships, engage. At will, the void screamed. A final wave of missile salvos and railgun volleys slammed into the enemy. The once invincible Dominion fleet disintegrated. Battleships, symbols of centuries of conquest, were ripped apart one by one, reduced to burning wrecks adrift in space. The eclipse of Dominion was the last to fall. Its hull, scorched and broken, spiraled toward Earth's atmosphere. Its final transmission crackled through the stars. We should have killed them before they became a threat. Then silence, a final explosion, and the ARX invasion fleet ceased to exist. Humanity had won, and the galaxy would never underestimate them again. Wreckage drifted in the void, twisted metal and shattered pride, a graveyard of the once mighty Dominion on Earth. Cheers erupted in every city, every bunker, every command center. People flooded the streets, waving flags, embracing strangers, crying tears of joy. From underground war rooms to orbital stations that barely survived, the message echoed, humanity had won. But aboard the Indomitable, Admiral Elias Vance didn't celebrate. He stood still, staring at the battlefield, jaw clenched. The Dominion was ruthless, powerful, unforgiving, and now they'd been humiliated. Monroe approached cautiously. "Sir, the battle is over. We did it." Vance exhaled slowly. "No," he said. "We won a battle. The war's just beginning." Monroe's brow furrowed. "You think they'll come back?" Vance turned to her, eyes grim. "We didn't just beat them. We shamed them. They won't let that stand." He glanced once more at the floating wreckage. "Next time," he said quietly, "they won't just send an invasion force." He met her gaze. "They'll send everything." Far beyond the Sol system, on the Dominion homeworld of Zaran, word of the catastrophe reached the throne room of the ARX High Council. The chamber was massive, its walls draped in banners of ancient victories. At its center sat the Primarch of the Dominion, supreme ruler of the ARX. 6 golden eyes glowed with cold fury. Before him knelt the sole surviving warlord of the invasion. They fought like no species we've ever faced," the warlord stammered. "Their tactics, their rage, it was as if they knew our every move before we made it." The Primarch's claws tapped slowly against the stone throne. "And what of High Warlord Vathan?" The warlord bowed his head. "Dead, my lord, his fleet gone." Silence. The gathered warlords shifted uneasily. Then the Primarch rose, his towering form casting shadows like a collapsing sun. Power radiated from him like a suffocating field. For centuries, none had dared challenge the Dominion. But now, humanity had shattered that illusion. They believed no one would come to their aid, the Primarch said, voice like distant thunder. They thought they stood alone. His eyes flared brighter. "But when we came to conquer, Earth's mightiest..." Armada arrived, his claws closed into fists. "Very well." He turned slowly toward the gathered warlords, his voice falling to a whisper that cracked like a storm. "Then we shall bring them extinction." The war for humanity's survival had only just begun. The victory celebrations on Earth lasted for days, but Admiral Elias Vance didn't rest. Beneath Geneva, inside the United Terran Command Center, hollow displays flickered with disturbing reports. Probes, scouting vessels, long-range sensors. The ARX Dominion was moving. "We've intercepted transmissions," said Lieutenant Kaido, head of Terran intelligence. "The High Council is furious. They've labeled us a galactic infestation. They've ordered total eradication." Vance folded his arms. "What are we looking at, Kaido?" Kaido tapped a command. A new projection filled the room. An armada, colossal, endless. "The Dominion isn't just sending another invasion force," Kaido said grimly. "They're mobilizing their entire war machine." Silence gripped the room. Hundreds, no thousands, of warships, dreadnoughts the size of cities, siege platforms capable of turning continents into molten oceans, weapons beyond anything Sol's brightest minds could comprehend. This "This is a full-scale extermination campaign," Monroe said softly. "They don't want to conquer us. They want us gone." Vance's jaw clenched. He'd expected vengeance, but not genocide. President Alan Graves stood at the head of the room. "Face pale. What are our options?" Vance's voice was steady. "We fight." Graves stared at him. "Can we win?" Vance looked around the room. At every officer, scientist, soldier, he saw no fear, only resolve. "We don't need to win," he said. "We just need to make them regret coming." Across the stars, the greatest fleet the ARX had ever assembled began its march. At its helm, aboard the harbinger of extinction, stood the Primarch himself. He stared into the dark, toward a distant blue world. "Let them gather their fleets," he murmured. "Let them believe they have hope." His claws flexed. "This time we burn their world to its core." The storm came faster than expected. Within weeks, the Dominion's apocalyptic fleet surged toward Sol. 3,000 warships, siege platforms the size of moons, swarms of hunter-killers, weapons designed not to conquer, but to erase. Against them stood Earth's last line of defense, the united Terran Armada, battered, outnumbered, but not broken. Every warship, every cannon, every satellite turned toward the storm. Even civilian freighters had been armed. Humanity would not run. They would not beg. They would stand. The Battle of Sol began. The Dominion came with overwhelming force. But Terran warships moved like phantoms. Outgunned, they executed impossible maneuvers. AI-controlled drones filled the void, striking with surgical precision. Orbital platforms unleashed nuclear storms. When the Dominion breached Mars' line, humanity deployed its final weapon, the Thanatos Protocol, experimental dark matter warheads, forbidden by interstellar law, detonated in the heart of the enemy fleet. Space bent, reality fractured. Hundreds of ARX ships were torn apart by gravitational chaos. Still, the Dominion pushed on. They broke Earth's outer defense line. They reached orbit, and still, humanity fought guerrilla strikes, ambushes. Desperate stands in shattered stations and crumbling skyforts. They fought on. Then, Admiral Elias Vance led a final strike. Aboard the Indomitable, battered and burning, he plunged into the heart of the harbinger of extinction, face to face with the Primarch. With his last breath, he detonated the core. The Indomitable became a sun. The Primarch burned with him. The Dominion fleet, leaderless, bleeding, hesitated. Humanity didn't. They struck with everything they had left, and the Dominion broke. They fled, and humanity did not follow. They watched the once great tyrants run. Years later, Earth still bore scars. But it stood. The Dominion, once the galaxy's most feared power, never recovered. Rebellions rose, empires fractured. Humanity had not only survived, they had changed the stars, and when future generations looked upward, they didn't see a darkness. They saw hope. They had won with blood, with fury, with fire, because when the galaxy came to erase them, when the Dominion thought Earth stood alone, when hope seemed lost, Earth's mightiest armada arrived.